Hello and welcome back to the second part of my two-part series on buying real estate abroad and the points to consider. Now, in the first video, I gave you 20 points to consider when buying real estate abroad. In this video, I'm going to give you 20 more. But before I begin, I just want to say I'm going to link the first video below in the comments section so that you can watch that before you watch this. Anyway, let's get going. Point 21, and I think this is a very, very important point, is currency fluctuation. Now, this is particularly important because you can lose a lot of money or gain just by the currency of the country you're buying in, going up or down. So I'll give you an example. Several years ago, if you're a US buyer and you bought in Turkey, you would have made money through local appreciation, but lost money through currency depreciation simply because the Turkish lira over the last 5 to 10 years has gone down a lot against the US dollar. Point 22, I want to consider supply and demand. Now, it is amazing once there is a bit of a boom in a city or a country, how developers just keep on building until prices come down. So I want to give you one such example in Bulgaria where you have Sunny Beach. Now, around 2002, 2007, 2008, there was one hell of a boom going on because prices were going up. But because developers just kept on building property in that area, prices became there was such an oversupply that prices started going down, and eventually there was a collapse. And there has been quite a similar situation in a more known market, namely Dubai, where they overbuilt and prices just went down a hell of a lot from 2013 to 2020. And even now, there's a glut, an oversupply of apartments, and they're still building. And even though there's been a property boom around the world, apartments in Dubai have barely risen. So I did 3 actual videos in Dubai, so you may want to check those out. Number 23, I want to talk about dealing with realtors, or known in other parts of the world as estate agents. It's very important. You have to consider, are they generally in that country acting on behalf of the buyer? Are they acting on behalf of the seller, or both? And also, are they considered in that country generally reliable? Are they honest? This is a very important consideration when buying as well. Number 24, I want to talk about natural disasters. So, for example, things like earthquake, flooding, landslides. You have to consider if there's a danger of that happening in the city, area or country you're going to buy in. I'll give you some examples. So Florida being one in the US, Japan being another. But even here, for example, in Europe, there has been a lot of flooding this summer, and Germany and Belgium were very badly affected. And these are countries where you would think this would not happen. So it's very important to take out insurance if you're going to buy in these areas. Number 25, I want to talk about flights to the destination in which you want to buy property in. This is important because you have to consider, are there regular flights to the destination you want to buy in? How expensive are they? So this can all add to the cost and the time of buying real estate in that country. And I just want to give a couple of examples. So let's say if you want to buy in Alicante, Spain, although it's unlikely there's going to be price appreciation in the future, it's a very, very easy place to get to. For example, from a country like the UK, it's very fast, inexpensive, and there's many, many regular flights. But for example, if you want to fly from the UK or anywhere in Europe to somewhere like Botswana, although there's probably a lot more potential in Botswana. I actually made a video quite recently on Botswana. If you want to buy, let's say, land and build a property in Botswana, I think you're going to make a lot of money. But you have to consider getting to Botswana is A, very expensive, and B, there are not many flights to Botswana, so it can be very time consuming. You're going to have to go through indirect flights. Number 26, let's talk about transport links within the area or city. So if you're buying, let's say, in a city, consider, does it have good bus communication, metro, trams, etc.? Is there good communication to suburban areas? If you buy in a coastal place, are there good transport links from the airport to that place you want to buy in, or indeed to the countryside. If you choose to buy in the countryside, are there good communication links from, let's say, the airport to the place you're buying in? Number 27, I think this is also really, really important, point 21, currency fluctuations. This is as important, I think, is the buying process and who you have to deal with. So in many instances, you're going to have to deal with, let's say, realtors, as we specified as well in point 23, lawyers, notaries. You may have to deal with the sellers directly as well. And it's important to think that in a country, even in more developed countries, the buying process can be very, very long and difficult. Namely, for example, in England and Wales, where the buying a property can often take from 3 to 6 months to complete. And you can actually lose the property, even though you make a bid and it's accepted. You could lose that property in the process. So you could have paid a lot of money if you're buying a house to have it surveyed, and then somebody comes in with a higher bid and you lose that property. So, and in other countries, for example, let's give you another example, Bulgaria. Once you've agreed to buy a property and you sign a preliminary contract and you put that 10% deposit down, if you decide to back out, you will lose that 10% deposit. So also another thing I think which is very important is that if you're using a lawyer, do not use a lawyer recommended by the estate agent. Number 28, I want to talk about the type of rental you want. So is it going to be long-term rental? So long-term rental, you may want to choose a city. Is it going to be short-term rental or Airbnb? In this case, you may want to choose a coastal city or a coastal town where people go seasonally. Look at restrictions as well. So, for example, in a lot of countries, there's Airbnb restrictions. And I think one notable city is Paris. Number 29. Who will look after your property whilst you're away? This is also very, very important. Are there reliable estate agents to look after your property whilst you're abroad? Who's going to take care of maintenance, renting the property out, other expenses, etc.? There may be countries where there isn't such a great market of estate agents that actually look after your property. Number 30, what type of tenant are you aiming to rent your property to, if indeed you want to rent out your property? So I just want to give you a couple of examples. If you want to rent in a very stable market, so for example, in London, your yields are not going to be very high, but the profile of your tenant tends to be a lot more reliable. It's a lot less likely than in other countries that your tenant will not pay the rent. And there's a lot of protection. Even if they don't pay the rent, you can get them out. Where, for example, let's profile another place, Detroit. I did a video on Detroit in the US where rental yields can be very high, but there is a lot more risk with the tenant there. So you're going to have more likely a tenant that may not be able to pay or will damage your property. So that's a very, very important consideration as well. Number 31, what type of property do you want to buy? So is it going to be a house, land, apartment, or even, let's say, a hotel? Which type of property has the most potential in the part of the world you're buying in? Number 32, what is going to be the condition of the property that you're buying? Are you going to buy a property that you're going to do up? Is it going to be a new property, a resale property? These are all important considerations to make. So I'll give you just some very quick examples. If you buy in Cyprus, now Cyprus is a place where resale properties are not very favorable with the locals. They're not popular at all, and so perhaps there it's better to buy a new property. Equally, let's say in Bulgaria, it's better to buy a newer property rather than a property in what I call the old communist buildings. Now, Bulgarians do not like living in these type of apartment blocks. They want to buy into a newer one, even if it's not new and a resale. They want to buy into a newer block. Also consider, let's say, apart from the condition of the property, also what floor. So for example, Italians hate buying on the ground floor. Now, number 33, where do you want to buy? Do you want to buy on the coast? Do you want to buy in the city or city centre or in the countryside? Now, generally, I think it's best to buy in a city, particularly the city centre. I think that's a place where land is always going to be limited and prices will stay high and continue to grow as well. But if you want to, you may want to buy, let's say, in a coastal place because you may want to rent it out for some of the year, but use it, for example, for other parts of the year for your own purposes, or you may want to retire there. So, for example, I'll give you an example. In Spain, you may want to buy in a coastal city because you may want to rent part of the year and then live in it for part of the year, and let's say in the future retire as well. Number 34, and I actually I would never have considered this point before this year. The local population, how are they well educated? What linguistic skills do they have? Now, I was particularly impressed when I went to Portugal this year, and in particular the city of Porto, where pretty much everybody spoke English, and amongst the young, many of them spoke several languages, and that's, I think, very important as well. So in a place where the young are up and coming, the education system is getting better, and the young speak very good English and other languages, I would prefer that city to another city where there's no linguistic skills at all. Number 35. Are you buying long-term or short-term? So what's the timeline for the property? Is it a property that you want to flip? Do you want to buy for the medium term? Do you want to buy for the long term? Or even, let's say, buy for the long term and leave it to a descendant, where there could be, let's say, death taxes, as there are in the UK, quite very, very heavy death taxes. So 40%, if you're leaving it to a child, 40% death tax. And as well, you have to have a strategy. Do you have an exit strategy? So you may buy in a very cheap place, but you may not be able to sell that in the future. Number 36, and I think this is also quite an important one. Does the place, and if you may be either after it, or it could be a place where more people are likely to buy because this country offers this, and it's citizenship by investment. So I want to give you two examples. Let's say Turkey, where if you buy a property for $250,000, you'll get a citizenship, and this is quite good. It helps the Turkish real estate market, or in Portugal as well. Portugal offers this as well, albeit they're going to stop offering it in places like Lisbon, Porto, the Algarve and the Silver Coast, but they're not stopping from this in places like Madeira. So potentially Madeira could be a good place to buy because of this. Number 37, and a delicate one, is crime rate and money laundering. So I want to give an example where a place where I wouldn't buy, also because, well, there's many reasons why I wouldn't buy it. But for example, in South Africa, the crime rate is very, very high. So I'd feel particularly uncomfortable buying in this country. Number 38, let's look at GDP growth. So look at the past, look at the present. Now, a high GDP growth in the past and in the future indicates that the property market will follow this as well, and prices are likely to rise. Number 39, make comparisons. So make comparisons between countries. Don't just look at one or two countries. Make comparisons between at least 10, 15 countries on yields, on potential growth, and all the other points I've mentioned. And if you make all these comparisons, it may help you in deciding where to buy abroad. And finally, number 40, and last one, is, are you better off buying into another investment? So it may be better to buy shares instead. It may be better to buy another type of investment vehicle instead of buying real estate abroad, or it may be better to buy another property in your own country. Look at the tax situation in particular. So for example, in the UK, it may be potentially better to buy rather than abroad, where you could get taxed more. It may be better to buy shares because you have every year in the UK, you can put 20,000 into the stock market, and you'll never have to pay capital gains or any tax on dividend income. And plus you get, on top of that, a 12,500, around 12,500, I believe, is capital gains tax allowance. And even if you go over this, if at the lower end you'll pay 10% and at the higher end 20% capital gains tax, whereas on property you don't have any of this. You have a capital gains tax allowance of 12,500, and there are other things for improvements, buy, sell costs, etc. But if at the lower end of tax you'll pay 18% instead of 10% on shares, and you'll pay 28% instead of 20% at the higher end. Anyway, there are a lot of things to consider. I may have missed out some things. If I have, please do comment below. Please tell me if there's other things that need to be considered. It will help the other viewers who are watching this channel. Anyway, that's it for this two-part series. If you've liked this video, please do click the like button. If you like my channel in general, please do subscribe, and I'll see you very soon on the next video. Thank you and bye for today.